Java, reading a text file into our program. So on a previous screencast, we looked at how we could take data and write it out to a text file. So now let's look at the inverse on how we can take that text file and read information back into our program. So I've set up a sample little function here called IOReadFile. Okay, so we're going to be able to demonstrate that. So let's just go to that. So here's our function. Let me step you through the variables here. So once again, we're defining our path. Okay, here's our location. So I got a string variable, okay, that has the location of the file that we want to open. I have a string variable here where we're going to dump the contents of each line into this string variable. And then I have here a Boolean file check, and we're going to talk about that a little later in our screencast. So the first thing that we need to do is exactly like we did in all the other steps. We need to define a path. So we're using the path. Once again here, look here, we can call this anything we want. It follows the same pattern there that we've done in the previous two steps here of creating directories, deleting directories, creating files. Paths.get, okay, we're putting in our location here. Okay, so we've created that path. Now, the actual code then to read the file in is right here. So let's look at it. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a buffered reader. Okay, so a buffered reader. It's just like the same pattern we had for the writer. So we can name this anything that we want. We're going to use files.new buffered reader. We're going to then put in the path, and then we need to also define what character set we're using. Okay, so those are basically the two steps. This is it. This creates the mechanism to read in our file. So then how do we use it? Let's look down here in the while statement. And we've got some interesting things going on here, which I think are pretty cool. So we have our while. So we have right here, here's our braces for the while. So as long as everything within those braces are true, okay, we can run the contents of our braces. So what's happening here? I want to focus our attention between these two braces or parentheses right here. Okay, so what's going to happen is this. Our file reader is going to go out here and read a line. Okay, so if our file's looking like this, okay, it's going to read that line into in-text1, our string variable. Okay, so that's the first thing to do. So it's going to take this line right here, okay, and put that line into this variable. Okay, that's the first step. After it does that, then we're going to look at the relationship between these parentheses and the condition statement here. So basically what happens then, we're going to compare the value of in-text to null. Okay, so basically what we've said here, as long as in-text1 is not equal to null, okay, meaning there's something in this variable, okay, we can then print that out. It's going to hit the brace, okay, then it's automatically going to advance to the next line. So we were here on our file, we're now going to move to here. Once again, it's going to load the contents of that line into this variable. Then we're going to compare it to see that it's not null, and as long as it's not null, we can print out that text. And this will eventually work its way all the way down to the last line of text, and eventually there won't be any line that you can move in there, so it's going to read in nothing. So it'll actually put nothing in here, and once we have a null in here, Is null not equal to null? No, null is equal to null. So that will make that false, and that will kick us out of our while statement. So when you're looking at this code right here, the file reader read line brings that text from the file into a variable, okay? And that's going to be a string by default. Now, once we're all done, it's gone through all the different lines of code, then once again, when we're done, we need to close our file reader, just like we did with our file writer. The other thing that we want to point out here is that Java set this up that the buffer reader needs to be wrapped in a try and catch statement. Okay, so if you just have it by itself, it's going to throw an error. Okay, so it needs to be wrapped in a try and catch statement. That's it. So basically, to use this, we create a path, then we create our buffered reader. We can read the information into a string variable using a read line. And then when we're all done, we close it. Those are the main steps for using a file reader. Now, let's go ahead and look at checking that file before we even start. So I want to move a little farther up in the code here. And let's look at this file check here. So I've got this Boolean set up here as a file check. Okay. So the first thing we still need to do is create a path. Okay, that's the very first thing when we use any of these is we have to create the path. Okay, so now once again we're going to use file check. And once again we're going to look at is a regular file. Okay, so is this a file or is this a shortcut, an alias, a symbolic link? Okay, so it's going to see if it's a real file. If it's a real file, that's true. Okay, is it readable? Okay, and then is it executable? Okay, so is it real? Will we be able to read it? Can we open it and write to it? Okay, that's what we're checking for here. Once again, do you have to use all three of these? No. If you just want to see if it's a regular file that's out there, you can just use the first one. Or maybe you want to see if it's these two. So that's going to return a Boolean of true or false. Okay, so if it's true, we can go ahead and just open up our file reader and read the stuff in. But if it's false, okay, so right here we want to check for false. So what we're doing here is this. By default, in the parentheses, it checks for true. So, but this is the not. So this is saying this is not true. So if the file check is not true, I'm simply putting out a thing here that says file cannot be opened, and then we're using return. Now remember, return takes us out of the function. Okay, so it completely takes us out of the function, and that would take us back to our static void main. Okay, so those are the basic steps for reading a file into your Java program.